today. But if not, we'll just wrap it up real quick on Wednesday. So where we left off last time is we left off talking about Motown in 1958 and how Berry Gordy revolutionized the recording industry with his business model, and with his kind of new approach to how not only music is made, but how music is distributed and how the music industry should work, and how he really pioneered a style that was very quickly copied by other record company heads all over the country. The next major development, come on, work with me here. There we go. Was in 1959 when KABL introduces format radio. Yeah, you were supposed to listen to those things on your own, Ben, but
Oh
if you
no, I'm
want
not gonna listen to my own. Gross.
to, okay, well, this is why you will never find love.
Yeah,
Uh,
you're right.
if we have time at the end of class, you guys can listen to my entire collection of Motown. Uh, so in 1959, KABL introduces format radio. Remember, commercial radio started, you know, I guess in the grand scheme of things, not long before this, meaning radio with advertising. It wasn't until 1959 that the pioneers at KABL, stationed in Philadelphia, decided, we should only play a specific genre, right? We should make our station just for this group of people, which is again kind of what you're used to today, right? You know that if you tune into 97 ZOK, you're going to hear pop music. If you tune into 96.7, you're going to hear classic rock. If you tune into, you know, any of the other stations, you're going to hear country. That's format radio. The idea here is, if I want this particular type of music or this particular type of radio, I have a place for it. Prior to 1959, you kind of were all over the board. Granted, in 1959, all over the board wasn't quite like it is today. We have a lot more differences in music today than we had in 1959. But there were still enough differences that it was hit or miss on whether or not you were going to get the music you wanted to hear when you turned to any given radio station. KABL launches with the idea that, okay, we're going to specifically market or target this market. We're going to specifically target this demographic that likes this genre of music, and let's see how that does for us. And obviously it did well because everybody else kind of copied. Everybody else just went along with it, and format radio is now the absolute norm. In 1960, Alan Freed is indicted in the payola scandal. If you've ever wondered why the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is in Cleveland, the reason is because of Alan Freed. I don't know if you've ever been to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but you don't need to. It's really not special at all. I went there and I was all excited. And I'm like, oh, that's it. This is it. But it's weird. Like, what in the hell does Cleveland have to do with rock and roll? Right. Well, the main reason is because of a guy named Alan Freed, who was a disc jockey, radio personality throughout the 1950s in Cleveland, Ohio. And Alan Freed was indicted in what came to be known as the payola scandal. And what's significant isn't that he was indicted. What's significant is why he was indicted and who wasn't indicted. The payola scandal was based on a very tried and true technique used in record producing and record distribution back in those days, where you would basically bribe a disc jockey to play a song, right? So if I'm an A&R rep, if I'm an A&R representative for a record label, and I've got this new artist and they've got a song out and I really want to boost their airplay, I might pay a visit to these radio stations that are influential in their markets and slide them $100, and say like, hey, this is a great record. Your audience will probably really like it. And then just kind of grease the wheels a little bit. Just give them a little money to encourage them to play the record. And again, this is very common practice. Practically every record company did this, and practically every DJ took the money. Almost every single DJ in the country that was of any significance would accept bribes as a way to get certain records on the air. But in 1960, the FBI indicts Alan Freed and claims that this is this massive scandal, a massive problem, and they arrest him and they make a big deal out of it. And this is huge, controversy about, well, how could he do that? No, 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 no. And like I said, the controversy isn't that he got indicted; it's why him and why nobody else. Part of the reason, a significant part of the reason, is because of what Alan Freed did with with those records. Alan Freed, again, worked in Cleveland, Ohio, and was their kind of midday DJ, right? So he had a very big audience, and his audience was primarily teenagers. Alan Freed used to play a lot of what at the time were called colored records, which meant records written and performed by Black artists, right? So Alan Freed was a white man playing music by Black artists for a predominantly white teenage audience. And they didn't like that. The FBI really didn't like that, because if there's one thing that continues to hold true throughout American history, it's white parents don't allow their children to be corrupted by the influence of non-white people. And so Alan Freed is indicted and put in federal prison. On the surface, it's because he took bribes to play records. But in the reality is pretty clear that it was because he was playing Black music to white teenagers and popularizing Black music in white families. And that was a big old no-no in 1960. And so that's the main reason why the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is in Cleveland, is kind of as a tribute to Alan Freed. In fact, in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, there's a whole exhibit just dedicated to Alan Freed and the payola scandal. I mean, it ruined the guy's life. It absolutely ruined no one would ever touch him again. He went to prison. It completely destroyed the man's life. But, in retrospect, now we applaud him and see, this guy really was just kind of a victim of inherent racism in the United States. And we can celebrate him today, but at the time he was absolutely destroyed. He was absolutely publicly crucified for what he did. 10 years later, 1970, NPR goes on the air. NPR stands for National Public Radio, for those of you who don't know. And if you've never listened to NPR, shame on you. You should listen to more NPR. It's good for you.
No.
I don't remember asking a question, Ben.
Okay.
You should listen to more NPR. And here's why you should listen to NPR. Because it's your radio station. It's your station. NPR is unique because it is the only publicly owned radio station in the United States. What does that mean? It means that they don't have a profit motive. It means that they are largely supported by tax dollars, which means NPR is not going to sensationalize stories to get advertising revenue, because they don't need it. NPR is the only radio station you can listen to that doesn't have ads. It doesn't have commercials, because they don't need it. When you don't have to whore yourself out to advertisers, then you don't have to worry about ratings. You don't have to worry about listenership. And so you don't have to be more ostentatious. You don't have to be grandiose. You don't have to succumb to the yellow journalism that ruined newspapers. Once you incentivize making money in media, you incentivize not being ethical. You incentivize not being honest. You incentivize sensationalism. And so when NPR goes on the air in 1970, now there is a source for information and a source for media that is entirely controlled by the United States citizenry, right? NPR still exists today, and you should listen to it. Shut up, Ben. You should listen to it. In Freeport, it's 90.5. It's WNIJ, based out of DeKalb, right? But there's an NPR station that for everywhere in the country. Everywhere you go in the United States, there's an NPR station you can listen to. And again, that is financed by you, the American taxpayer. You are paying for NPR. They do pledge drives, right? They do fund drives for people to voluntarily give more money, which then enables them to do more things. But their operating costs are covered by taxpayers. And that's unique, right? They're literally the only radio station in the country that falls into that category. In 1979, Sony unveils the Walkman. I still have one. I love it. The Walkman was the first portable cassette player. So in 1948, when the transistor radio was introduced, now I can listen to the radio everywhere I go, right? I have a portable radio. But radio doesn't give you any control, right? You're left to whatever the DJ or the station manager decides to play at that time. The Walkman allows you to control your music anywhere you go. So I have the portability of a transistor radio, but I have the control of a cassette player. And so when Sony unveils the Walkman in 1979, it not only gives us the portability, but it incentivizes us to buy more music, right? It incentivizes us to buy more books on tape, because now I have more places I can listen to them, right? If the only place you can listen to a cassette tape is in your car or at your desk, that's only so many hours a day that you're going to be available to listen to those things. But if you can take your cassettes with you everywhere you go, now I need more media, right? Now I need more that I can consume. So the Walkman was not only incredibly significant in terms of how we consume, but it was also significant in terms of how much we consume. And that idea of portability continues to this very day, right? Your phone is just an updated Walkman, right? The idea that I should be in control of my music wherever I go, which leads to its own problems we'll deal with. In 1987, the FCC eliminates the Fairness Doctrine. Remember, the FCC is the government agency in charge of regulating and overseeing all broadcasts. And in 1987, under immense political pressure, the FCC decides to eliminate one of its founding documents, the Fairness Doctrine. The Fairness Doctrine was a principle, it was a guideline, it was a regulation that said all public broadcasting, all broadcasting for public consumption, that is, needs to give equal time to both sides of a debate, right? So the Fairness Doctrine said, if you're going to be on air and you're going to give 10 minutes to political candidate A, well, then you also have to give 10 minutes to political candidate B, right? You have to give equal time to both sides of an issue, because remember, the main point of the Radio Act of 1927 was this is for the public good, right? You could broadcast if it's for the public good. Well, right from the beginning, the FCC said, okay, but the public good means, it has to be equalized, right? It's not public good if it's only one side being represented. We need both sides represented so that people can make an informed decision. In 1987, again, under immense political pressure, the FCC folded and eliminated the Fairness Doctrine. And this is why you now have very, very, very obviously biased political media, right? This is why you can have a television station that is explicitly liberal or explicitly conservative. They're allowed to do that. Now, ironically, people get upset about that. People tend to get really, like, oh, this is garbage. You shouldn't allow this. Well, I mean, they weren't allowed that for a long time. And now they can do whatever they want. Now I can host a radio show. I can own a radio station that only explicitly shares one viewpoint, and that is perfectly legitimate and perfectly acceptable. There are some who argue that this is free market at work, right? That's the way that capitalism is supposed to go. Is if your ideas aren't popular, then you will fail and the market has spoken. If your ideas are popular, the market will succeed, right? They will boost you up. There are detractors, however, who say that, well, the market isn't an equal place, right? It's not an equal ground. And so you can't really make that case that this is just free markets at work. There's a lot of built-in kind of weight on the scales right out of the gate. So the fairness doctrine was necessary. Every once in a while, this debate comes back up in the public sphere. Every once in a while, you'll hear people in the public sphere kind of debating this idea again. But by and large, most people kind of are just used to the way it is now. And, there aren't a lot of people who are clamoring for the fairness doctrine to return. Just because, again, we've gotten so used to it, right? We've gotten so used to, okay, yeah, but there's a really liberal station and there's a really conservative station. So it balances out. Any questions so far? Good. So I don't want to answer your stupid questions. Okay. In 1996, Congress does the dumbest thing it could possibly do. And it passes the Telecommunications Act of 1996. I make zero apologies for the fact that I cannot talk about the Telecommunications Act in an unbiased and fair way. It is objectively terrible. Objectively, it's just the worst thing Congress has done in a very long time for people like me, and people like you, for that matter. So what was it? The Telecommunications Act was an act that was designed to, on the surface, what?
You should be my teacher.
Okay. I mean, I am a teacher. Okay, sorry, my daughter interrupted me to tell me that I should be her teacher, which I don't think is possible because of nepotism. But anyway, the Telecommunications Act was a law that, on the surface, right, the premise of the law was to make the premise of the law was to make telecommunications more accessible, to make telecommunications easier for people to access. But what it really did was deregulate that industry so much that it destroyed jobs overnight. Prior to the Telecommunications Act, an individual entity was limited in how many radio stations they could own in a particular market, right? If you live in a market size the size of Chicago, right, which is the second or third largest in the country, depending on what year we're looking at, then you can only own like one, maybe two radio stations prior to the Telecommunications Act. After the Telecommunications Act, you could now own almost half of the radio stations in Chicago, right? You are legally allowed to own significantly larger shares of media companies in a particular market. How does that kill jobs? Well, let's look at Rockford, right? Let's say there are 15 radio stations in Rockford. There's not, there's more than that, right? But prior to the Telecommunications Act in 1996, if there were 15 radio stations, that meant you needed 15 DJs on air at any given time. That means you needed 15 program managers, 15 station managers, 15 advertising executives, 15 engineers. Every station needed its own workforce. After the Telecommunications Act, now one company can own 5 stations. Why would you need 5 people to run your one operation? So after the Telecommunications Act happened, now I was no longer an engineer just for, WZOK. Now I'm the engineer for ZOK and KXQ and 5 other stations, right? Now my engineer goes from I need 6 to I need 1. 5 people just like that lost their jobs, right? Same with people who are on air. Same with people who are running the behind the scenes of the stations, all of that. There's a reason why people in radio today don't make a livable wage. Your favorite disc jockey, your favorite radio personality, if you have one, has like 3 other jobs to make ends meet. Some of them work multiple jobs at the station. Some of them work at the station and they have like 3 other side gigs outside of the radio station. But a typical DJ, a typical on-air DJ in the United States makes about $30,000 a year. And that's if you're good. That's like if you're good. Because they don't need to pay you more than that. Because there's so many other people willing to take the job. There are so few positions available with so many people willing to do it that they can get away with paying you shit, right? And that only comes about because of the Telecommunications Act in 1996. There are a lot of other issues that come along with that act, and we'll talk about those when we get into later units in the class. But the basic gist is in 1996, Congress passes a law that destroys the workability of the industry. It destroys the job market for people in radio and television. And I will never forgive them. But, you know, that's personal. In 1999, MP3s are introduced to the American peoples. The MP3 is introduced in 1999. The MP3 is not the first audio medium. It's not the first way to record digitally and transmit digitally, not even close to the first. But it's significant because of its encoding, right? An MP3 is going to give you the best sound for a very small file size. And that's really, really important for how the music industry is progressing. You need high quality because people don't want to listen to shit, but you also need it to be easily transmittable. You need it to go from one source to another very easily. So when the MP3 format comes around, that allows you to take a very high quality sound, right, like CD quality sound, and put it in a file size that's maybe half the size of what it used to be, which makes it easier to transmit electronically, right? You know, you kids today, you're so spoiled with your high-speed internet, but you know, when this was introduced in 1999, most of us had dial-up internet, right? If not all of us had dial-up internet. And dial-up internet is slow, and it's clunky, and it could get interrupted really easily. And so having a small file size means that you can share it much, much quicker and with less likely interruptions, right? It's less likely that that transmission is going to be interrupted and cut off. I can tell you there were multiple times in my childhood where I'd be trying to download something and my brother would pick up the phone and there it is. The transmission is cut off and it's not like you just resume downloading, right? You'd have to restart the download from the beginning. You know, so the MP3 coming along was huge at that time because it allowed it made it so much easier to share music files with high quality. In 2001, Napster gets shut down. Napster was one of the premier file sharing websites of its day. It was, you know, probably like the first file sharing website that people knew about. And the way it worked is that if I had Napster, right? So if I had a Napster on my computer, so long as my computer was connected to the internet, anybody else who had Napster could download any of the files I had on my hard drive, right? So Napster didn't have like a catalog, right? There was no like central library of files for Napster. It completely relied upon the people who were logged on at the same time, right? So you could download files from anybody else who was logged on to Napster at the same time you were. That obviously led to a lot of music piracy, some film piracy, but mostly music, right? If I had all of my music on my computer, which now thanks to MP3s is really easy to do, if I'm logged into Napster, anybody else in the world could log in and download my music library. This obviously doesn't sit well with the recording industry because, well, that cuts into their profit. why would I buy an album when I can just go onto Napster, download it for free from somebody in Norway? And again, because MP3s are available, it's fast, it's efficient, and it's high quality. After significant legal pressure, many lawsuits, including the federal government getting involved, in 2001, Napster is shut down for good. The founder of Napster is arrested, and they shut down the website for good. So you can no longer share files online. Ha ha, we got you. And as you guys know, in 2020, it is impossible to share files online. So they did a good job. They really nailed it. They shut that shit down. It is just impossible. No one could possibly pirate music in the year 2020 online. It just doesn't happen. Just not a thing. Yes, I'm being facetious. Napster shuts down in 2001, and it was like a sentimental. It was like it was a moral victory, right? Like, oh, we got the big name, but immediately after, there's LimeWire. There's all these other sites that come up. There's all these other programs that do the exact same thing. Now you have torrenting. They can't stop piracy. They can't stop digital piracy. So shutting down Napster was a big strike, but all it did was just shift the market to other places. In that exact same year, Apple introduces the iPod, which I remember vividly, by the way. I still remember the announcement of the iPod and like being blown.
I remember that.
Yeah. I was so damn jealous the first time I actually saw someone with an iPod. I still have my 3rd generation iPod, which is basically a hard drive with a screen on it. And like you hear it start up. Like when you hit play, you hear the gears going as it's playing the music. In 2001, Apple introduces the iPod, which again is only feasible due to the MP3 formatting. Because we figured out how to take a high quality sound and put it into a small amount of digital space. Ironically, a lot of people were filling their iPods with stuff they downloaded from Napster. It was great, right? The problem with a Walkman, as awesome as a Walkman was, the problem with it was that it relied on you to carry your tapes around with you, right? So like, if you liked a diversity of music, or if you're one of those people who likes to listen to a song by this artist and then a song by this artist and bounce around like that, you needed to have a bunch of cassette tapes on you and swap them out, right? There was also, with cassette tapes, there was no way to easily go from one track to the next. Right? There wasn't a track stop on the cassette. You had to actually fast forward and rewind until you found the right moment. They had portable CD players in 2001. We had Discmans back then, but Discmans skip, CDs skip, right? Really, really easily. You jostle them a little bit and they cut off or they sound crazy. So when Apple introduces the iPod in 2001, I no longer have to carry around external media. I could easily access my library across a range of different categories, and it fits in my pocket, right? My whole music library in my pocket. That's the way they kind of sold it. Storage was not what it is today. The original iPods could hold like maybe 3 albums. They were not very large capacity, but the concept obviously became really, really popular and successful. And as media grows, as media storage type grows, the iPod and now the iPhone and the Android and all that become more and more popular and more successful. But the concept had to be established. And again, it's built on the previous technological breakthroughs. Also in 2001, kind of an important year, Sirius and XM satellite radio launch. Sirius radio launches and XM radio launches. This is a point where I need to admit that I'm not always right. Because in 2001, I remember when they launched satellite radio, and I made fun of it to anyone and everyone who would listen. I thought it was the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. It was so stupid. This thing is going to fail in 2 years' time. What an absolutely idiotic idea. Blah 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 blah. Well, I was wrong. It was really wrong. What made satellite radio special is, first and foremost, it was commercial free, right? That was one of their big selling points. It's commercial free. You can listen to your music all day long without ever hearing a commercial. Well, how can they afford to do that? How can you operate without any revenue coming in from advertising? Well, you get that revenue from a subscription service. It's a paid service. And that's why I thought it would fail. I thought nobody's going to pay for radio. That's stupid, right? Radio exists. It's free. Why would I pay for radio just to get away from ads? Well, the other bonus of satellite radio is that its transmission distance is countrywide, right? If I turn on a radio station on my XM radio in Rockford, Illinois, and I drive to Las Vegas, Nevada, I never lose signal. I'm listening to that station the entire way. Right, with FM and AM, I have to constantly radio surf. I have to constantly dial surf, trying to find a new station. Because as soon as I get one out of one area, I've got to find the station for the next area, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So Sirius was commercial free. It was, you could tune into it from anywhere in the country, and not advertised, but still really, really important. Sirius XM was not regulated by the FCC. The FCC has no jurisdiction over Sirius and XM radio, which is why they can be as explicit as they want to be. There's no need for censored music on Sirius XM. That goes for the on-air talent. That goes for the recorded music. They can say what they want and they can play what they want. The premise is the same reason why HBO can say and show pretty much whatever they want. It's because the idea here is that you're paying for it. You have to go out of your way to get it. So you then are assuming the liability if your kid happens upon it, right? My kid could theoretically stumble across ABC or NBC or CBS or ZOK or, right? If it's broadcast, a child could stumble upon it with no fault of the parent whatsoever. If it's a paid service, however, right? My 6-year-old isn't paying for HBO. My 6-year-old isn't paying for Sirius XM. So that's my fault they have access to it. It's only my fault if they have access to it. And as a result, the FCC doesn't touch it, right? They say, okay, well, that's out of our bounds. That's not part of our issue. And so Sirius XM gets popular for yet a third reason, right? Not only is it commercial free, not only is it across the country, but it plays what you really want to hear. And it has hosts who are not restrained. Their biggest coup was right out of the gate. They signed Howard Stern, who was like the country's premier shock jock, right? He was known for being completely outrageous and completely irreverent and shocking and blah, 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 blah. And they hired him. They signed him to a very lucrative, very long-term contract. And that brought a lot of people over to the service, a lot of people over to Sirius specifically. But both Sirius and XM had they had the same advantages. In 2003, Apple launches iTunes. Apple recognized very quickly that file sharing was popular. File sharing was something people enjoyed, and it had a significant hold on the market. So when they see Napster get shut down, and then LimeWire and all these other sites take over, they realize, oh, so people are really liking this digital transmission idea. Yeah, obviously they like the free thing, but the free thing also came with a lot of concerns. Oftentimes when you would download a file through Napster or LimeWire, any one of these file sharing sites, it wasn't what you thought it was. Because there's no control over it. There's no regulation, right? If I label a file on my computer, Elvis Presley, Suspicious Minds, and somebody goes to download it, they think they're downloading the song by Elvis Presley, but it's actually, like a picture of my dog's butthole or something, right? There's no quality control for what's going out. there was also a prime opportunity for security concerns there. If there's nobody regulating, controlling what is going across here, what is coming from one computer to the next, it's real easy to embed viruses. It's real easy to embed malware. It's real easy to embed things you don't want on your computer. So when iTunes launches, it allows all the convenience of file sharing, but also adds that level of, you know what you're getting, right? Yeah, it's not free, but you know what you're getting. And it wasn't free, but it was significantly cheaper than its contemporary competition. When iTunes launched, you could buy a song for 99 cents. That was kind of their marketing gimmick. That was their sell point, was that every song is 99 cents. And you didn't have to buy the whole album. You could just buy the song. You could just buy the individual unit as a song, not the whole album. You could buy a whole album and you get a discount if you bought the whole album. But you could just buy one song at a time. And that proved to be something the market wanted. It proved to be something that people were interested in. They were willing to pay 99 cents for a song if they knew it was the actual song. And it wasn't going to be, malware. It wasn't going to be viruses. It wasn't going to be somebody recording the song off of a radio station on a tape deck. For the security and the certainty, they were willing to pay. So when iTunes launched in 2003, they really had a very good footing because people were already used to file sharing. They're already used to downloading music. They're already used to that modality. But they also now had the protections of it and the backing of a company as big as Apple to really be clear, like, yep, we know we can trust this. We know that they've got protections in place. I was going to say some other stuff about it. Well, okay, yeah, I will say. iTunes is the reason I moved to Freeport. I don't live there anymore, but when I got the job at Highland in 2005, right, I was really excited about it, but I couldn't bring myself to move to Freeport. So my first year of working at Highland, I was still living in Rockford and commuting. And the biggest reason I couldn't move to Freeport is because they didn't have a record store. The only place in Freeport where I could go to buy music was Walmart. And Walmart censored their records, and they also had a very limited supply of music and didn't really have the kind of stuff I was looking for. And so I was like, I'm not moving to Freeport. I can't buy music out there. Once iTunes became really established and I started to actually have money for a nice computer, I realized, oh, okay, yeah, I can move to Freeport because I can just download all the music I want. I can just access all the music I want via iTunes, and I don't have to worry about it. And so that's ultimately what allowed me to move to Freeport, was because I could access my music from my living room. I didn't have to go anywhere to get new music. And that was a huge deal for me back in those days. It was a huge deal for me. So iTunes really opened up a lot of avenues for a lot of people, right? My case isn't exactly emblematic of most cases, but it's certainly representative of some cases. It is certainly something that affected other people, was their ability to access everything they want from anywhere they are. Like we talked about with Amazon and book selling, right? It opens up that marketplace for people to be where they want to be and still access the things that they want, even if there's not a brick and mortar shop nearby. In 2005, the Supreme Court gives a ruling that file sharing software creators can be sued. Oh, my bad. Supreme Court rules that file sharing software creators can be sued. In other words, if I create a program, if I create a software program whose entire purpose is to violate copyright, if the entire nature and purpose of my software is to violate the intellectual property rights of creators, the Supreme Court says that those creators can sue me. Even if I'm not actually violating their copyright, if I'm not actually downloading their stuff, I'm not violating their rights. I'm just enabling other people to do it. I can be held liable for that. Some of you might hear that and think, well, good. You should. You're violating copyright. You're making this thing that's only there for illegal purposes. But I'm going to ask you, can you name any other product that would fall under that category? Right? Do we sue gun manufacturers when their product is used in a mass shooting? Do we sue pharmaceutical companies when their products are turned into drugs? Do we sue automobile companies when their vehicles are used to mow people down? That's the real concerning thing for me with this case, with this finding from the Supreme Court, is it holds software creators to a standard that we don't hold anyone else to. It creates a special class of accountability for protecting copyrights, not human lives, copyrights. That's disturbing, right? And who's being harmed by this? That was one of the big stories in the early 2000s was, Metallica, the band Metallica was on this absolute crusade, to destroy Napster, right? Because Napster was, they're violating all these copyrights and they're killing the industry and blah, 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 blah. Metallica's making millions of dollars. They're all very financially comfortable. They ain't got to worry. But they're turning around and suing 13-year-old kids in Nebraska for downloading an album, and suing them for like $250,000. Who's being targeted by lawsuits that allow you to sue the creators of software, and who's doing the suing, right? Who's getting hurt by these lawsuits, and who's bringing about these lawsuits? So again, it's significant that the Supreme Court ruled, unlike every other industry, unlike every other product that exists in the American marketplace, if you create software that allows people to violate copyrights, you're just as responsible as the people who actually violate the copyrights. Which again is the equivalent of saying, if you use this company's firearm to commit a crime, that firearm company is just as liable as you for committing the crime. It's a legal theory that doesn't hold up in any other way. So it bugs me. It's always bothered me, and I think it always will bother me. You don't care. In 2005, Pandora launches. Some of you still have it. Some of you still have Pandora. Pandora launches in 2005, and this begins the ability to stream music without downloading it. Right? iTunes is great because it allows me to get the music I want on my phone or on my iPod or whatever, but I got to download it first. Pandora allows me to listen to it without downloading it. Right? It's on-demand radio. Right? It requires no space on my device, and I can listen to what I want to listen to wherever I am. Obviously, that idea has taken off. One of the things that I always kind of struggle to understand and struggle to work around is how many students don't ever download songs. They only listen to music on Pandora or Spotify, right? Or some other streaming service. That really throws me off. The idea that why wouldn't you want to just have this on your device so you can listen to it even if you're not connected to the internet or a cell signal? But there's so many people who are just, no, they're more than comfortable. Just everything is Spotify, everything's Pandora. They don't need to download anything. And that really throws me off. again, because I'm old and out of touch. But in 2005, when Pandora launches, again, it opens the floodgates. It says, okay, there's a new market available. There's a new modality available that can be very, very profitable. In 2008, Sirius and XM merge. So only 7 years after they first go public, Sirius and XM realize, you know what? We're splitting the market. It's already a small market. If we join forces, everybody wins, right? Not literally everybody. When Sirius and XM merged, it created a kind of a shrinking of their content because they had to get rid of some shows and get rid of some channels to make space. But on the whole, it allows for them to share the larger pool. By becoming one company, they share a larger pool. There is no competition to Sirius XM, right? There's competition in terms of entertainment, but there's no other satellite radio. The only satellite radio you could get is Sirius XM. You can, again, you've got Pandora, you've got Spotify, you've got, Netflix, you've got all kinds of other, you got terrestrial radio, you got all kinds of competitors in terms of entertainment, but they're the only satellite radio game in town. If you want satellite radio, Sirius XM is literally the only provider you can go to. In 2008, the Nielsen Company ends Arbitron's monopoly on radio ratings. This is going to require a little bit of backstory. Holy shit, it's 10:48. So that backstory I'll have to wait. What happened? Where did that time go? How is it 10:48 already? What the fuck? Did somebody drug me? That did not feel like 48 minutes. But okay. All right. So I guess we'll have to finish this on Wednesday then. So on Wednesday, we'll talk about Nielsen ending Arbitron's monopoly. And then we'll finish out this unit. So yeah, I will see you guys on Wednesday. Again, unless I have to email you, hopefully in person. So let's plan on in person. Unless something happens. Adam, video production will be in person tomorrow. And again, unless something happens between now and then, but as of right now, planning on in person for the rest of the week for all of my classes. So, hey man, it's Rona time. Stuff happens. Not always in control. So, well, then explain this, Lindsay, because nobody was having fun on this call. So I don't know how the time flew like this, because just confused and scared. All right, guys. Well, be good. Try not to get the Rona, and I will catch you all on Wednesday. Okay, bye.